He opened the bedroom door. It was like coming into the cold, marbled room of a mausoleum after the moon has set. Complete darkness, not a hint of the silver world outside. The windows tightly shut, the chamber a tomb world where no sound from the great city could penetrate. The room was not empty. He listened. The little mosquito delicate dancing hum in the air, the electrical murmur of a hidden wasp snug in its special pink warm nest. The music was almost loud enough so that he could follow the tune. He felt his smile slide away, melt, fold over and down on itself like a tallow skin, like the stuff of a fantastic candle burning too long, and now collapsing, and now blown out. Darkness. He was not happy. He was not happy. He said the words to himself. He recognized this as the true state of affairs. He wore his happiness like a mask, and the girl had run off across the lawn with the mask, and there was no way of going to knock on her door and ask for it back. Without turning on the light, he imagined how this room would look. His wife stretched on the bed, uncovered and cold, like a body displayed on the lid of a tomb. Her eyes fixed to the ceiling by invisible threads of steel, immovable. And in her ears, the little seashells, the thimble radios tamped tight, and an electronic ocean of sound, of music and talk coming in on the shore of her unsleeping mind. The room was indeed empty. Every night the waves came in and bore her off on their great tides of sound, floating her wide-eyed toward morning. There had been no night in the last 2 years that Mildred had not swum that sea, had not gladly gone down in it for a third time. The room was cold, but nonetheless he felt he could not breathe. He did not wish to open the drapes, to open the French windows, for he did not want the moon to come into the room. So, when the feeling of a man who will die in the next hour for lack of air, he felt his way toward the open, separate, and therefore cold bed. An instant before his foot hit the object on the floor, he knew he would hit such an object. It was not unlike the feeling he had experienced before turning the corner and almost knocking the girl down. His foot, sending vibrations ahead, received back echoes of the small barrier across its path even before the foot swung. His foot kicked. The object gave a dull clink and slid off in the darkness. He stood very straight and listened to the person on the dark bed in the completely featureless night. The breath was coming out of the nostrils was so faint it stirred only the farthest fringes of life. A small leaf, a black feather, a single fiber of hair. He still did not want outside light. He pulled out his igniter, felt the salamander etched on its silver disc, gave it a flick. 2 moonstones looked up at him in the light of the small handheld fire, 2 pale moonstones buried in a creek of clear water over which the life of the world ran, not touching them. Mildred! Her face was like a snow-covered island, upon which rain might fall, but it felt no rain, over which clouds might pass their moving shadows, but she felt no shadow. There was only the singing of the thimble wasps in her tamped-shut ears, and her eyes all glass, and breath going in and out, softly, faintly, in and out, her nostrils, and her not caring whether it came, went, or came. The object he had sent tumbling with his foot now glinted under the edge of his own bed. The small crystal bottle of sleeping tablets, which earlier today had been filled with 30 capsules, and which now lay uncapped and empty in the light of the tiny flare. He stood there, the sky over the house screamed. There was a tremendous ripping of sound of 2 giant hands had torn 10,000 miles of black lines down the seam. Montag was cut in half. He felt his chest chopped down and split apart. The jet bombers going over. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. 6 of them, 9 of them, 12 of them, and one, and another, and another, did all the screaming for him. He opened his mouth and let their shriek come down and out between his bared teeth. The house shook. The flare went out in his hand. The moonstones vanished. He felt his hand plunge toward the telephone. The jets were gone. He felt his lips move, brushing the mouthpiece over the phone. Emergency hospital. A terrible whisper. He felt that the stars had been pulverized by the sound of the black jets, and that in the morning the earth would be covered with their dust, like a strange snow. That was his idiot thought when he stood shivering in the dark and let his lips go on moving and moving. They had this machine, They had two machines, really. One of them slid down into your stomach like a black cobra down an echoing well, looking for all the old water and the old time gathered there. It drank up the green matter that flowed to the top in a slow boil. Did it drink of the darkness? Did it suck out all the poisons accumulated with the years? It fed in silence, with an occasional sound of inner suffocation and mind searching. It had an eye. The impersonal operator of the machine could, by wearing a special optical helmet, gaze into the soul of the person whom he was pumping out. What did the eye see? He did not say. He saw but did not see what the eye saw. The entire operation was not unlike the digging of a trench in one's yard. The woman on the bed was no more than a hard stratum of marble they had reached. Go on, anyway, shove the bore down, slush up the emptiness, if such a thing could be brought in the throb of the suction snake. The operator stood smoking a cigarette. The other machine was working too. The other machine, operated by an equally impersonal fellow in non-sustainable reddish-brown coveralls. This machine pumped out all the blood from the body and replaced it with fresh blood and serum. Gotta clean 'em out both ways, said the operator, standing over the silent woman. No use getting the stomach if you can't clean the blood. Leave that stuff in the blood, and the blood hits the brain like a mallet. Bang! A couple of thousand times, and the brain just gives up, just quits. Stop it, said Montag. I was just saying, said the operator. Are you done? Said Montag. They shut the machines up tight. We're done. His anger did not even touch them. They stood with the cigarette smoke curling around their noses and into their eyes without making them blink or squint. That's $50. First, why don't you tell me if she's going to be all right? Sure, she'll be okay. We got all the mean stuff right out in our suitcase here. Can't get at her now. As I said, you take out the old and put in the new, you're okay. Neither of you is an MD. Why didn't they send an MD from emergency? Hell. The operator's cigarette moved on his lip. We get these cases 9 or 10 a night. Got so many starting up a few years ago. We had special machines built. With the optical lens, of course, that is new. But the rest is ancient. You don't need an MD case like this. All you need is 2 handymen. Clean up the problem in half an hour. Look. He searched for the door. We gotta go. Just got another call on the old ear thimble. 10 blocks from here. Someone else just jumped off the cap of a pillbox. Call if you need us again. Keep her quiet. We got a counter-sedative in her. She'll wake up hungry. So long. And the men with the cigarettes in their straight-lined mouths, the men with eyes of puff adders, took up the load of the machine and tube, their case of liquid melancholy, and the slow, dark sludge of nameless stuff, and strolled out the door. Montag sank down in a chair and looked at this woman. Her eyes were closed now, gently, and he put out his hand to feel the warmness of breath on his palm. Mildred, he said at last. There are too many of us, he thought. There are billions of us, and that's too many. Nobody knows anyone. Strangers come and violate you. Strangers come and cut your heart out. Strangers come and take your blood. Good God, who were those men? I never saw them before in my life. Half an hour passed. The bloodstream in this woman was new, and it seemed to have done a new thing to her. Her cheeks were very pink, and her lips were very fresh and full of color, and they had looked soft and relaxed. Someone else's blood there. If only someone else's flesh and brain and memory. If only they could have taken her mind along with the dry cleaners and emptied the pockets and steamed and cleansed and reblocked it and brought it back in the morning. If only. He got up and put back the drapes and opened the windows wide to let in the night air. It was 2:00 in the morning. Was it only an hour ago Clarice McClellan in the street and him coming in the dark room and his feet kicking the little crystal bottle? Only an hour, but this world had melted down and sprung up in a new, colorless form. Laughter blew across the moon-colored lawn from the house of Clarice and her father and mother and uncle, who smiled so quietly and so earnestly. Above all, their laughter was relaxed and hearty and not forced in any way. Coming from the house that was so brightly lit at this late at night, while all the other houses were kept to themselves in the darkness, Montag heard the voices talking, giving, weaving, reweaving their hypnotic web. Montag moved out through the French windows and crossed the lawn, without even thinking of it. He stood outside the talking house in the shadows, thinking he might even tap on their door and whisper, "Let me come in. I won't say anything. I just want to listen. What is it you're saying?" But instead, he stood there, very cold, his face a mass of ice, listening to a man's voice, the uncle, moving along at an easy pace. Well, after all, this is the age of the disposable tissue. Blow your nose on a person, wad 'em, flush 'em away, reach for another blow, wad, flush. Everybody's using everybody else's coattails. How are you supposed to root for the home team when you don't even have a program and know the names? For what matter what color jerseys they're wearing or what trot out on the field? Montag moved back to his own house, left the window wide, checked Mildred, tucked the covers about her carefully, and then lay down with the moonlight on his cheekbones, on the frowning ridges of his brow, with his moonlight distilled in each eye to form a silver cataract there. One drop of rain, Clarice. Another drop, Mildred. A third, the uncle. A fourth, the fire tonight. 1, Clarice. 2, Mildred. 3, uncle. 4, fire. 1, Mildred. 2, Clarice. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, Clarice. Mildred, uncle, fire. Sleeping tablets, men, disposable tissue. Coattails, blow, wad, flush. Clarice, Mildred, uncle, fire. Tablets, tissues, blow, wad, flush. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, rain. The storm. The uncle laughing. Thunder falling downstairs. The whole world pouring down. The fire gushing up in a volcano. All rushing on down around the spouting roar and revering stream toward morning. I don't know anything anymore, he said, and let a sleep lozenge dissolve on his tongue.